Yo, what's up guys? Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a new installment in the Under the Meta series, but I go over a deck that I definitely think is strong and has a lot of potential, but isn't quite 2-1 for whatever reason. I'm going to go over the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, where it potentially falls short, and how it could be improved going forward. So in this episode, I'm going to be going over a deck that I'm calling Blue-Red Mindsplice Mastery in Historic. And as you can see from the untapped screenshot, I'm currently 15-5 with the deck, so it's been performing pretty well for me. You know, that's a pretty respectable win rate. And as the name suggests, this deck is built around this new card, Mindsplice Apparatus. So card from the latest set, and it's a 4-mana artifact with flash, and at the beginning of your upkeep you put an oil counter on it, and then instants or sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on it. Sorry. So this is a really powerful effect. Discounting all of your instants and sorceries even by 1 mana is really huge, but as this ticks up, you know, and starts discounting your spells even more, you just completely run away with the game because everything you're casting is so efficient. So the fact this has flash is really huge because we're basically playing it in a control deck, and so you can hold up your interaction, and then if the opponent doesn't do anything, you can just flash this in, and then you just completely run away with the game in terms of your mana advantage. So as I go through the other cards, I'm going to explain what they're in the deck for, how they work when we don't have the apparatus, and also how they get benefited once we do have the apparatus in play. So I'm going to start off here by talking about Magma Opus and Mizzix's Mastery, because these are two of the most important cards in the deck. Now, if you've played Jeskai Control in the past, you know how well these cards combo well together. So, you know, if you discard a Magma Opus on turn 2, you create a treasure token, then on turn 3, you can cast the Mizzix's Mastery off the treasure token, targeting the Magma Opus to deal 4 damage split among different targets, which is especially strong if the opponent has early creatures. You know, you can use this as removal, then you get a 4/4, and you get to draw 2 cards, which is insanely powerful for 4 mana. So this is really nice because it also gives you a really strong kind of powerful mini combo when you don't have the apparatus, because one of the weaknesses of building your whole deck around a single card is if you don't have that card, your deck can kind of feel underpowered. So having like another mini combo here that is really strong on its own is a really nice addition to the deck. Even outside of having these cards together, they also individually work really well in the game plan of the deck as well. Magma Opus, for example, we can discard this to create a treasure token, which allows us to ramp into Mindsplice Apparatus on turn 3. You know, getting Apparatus into play as soon as possible is obviously great because you get the discounts quicker. So getting Apparatus down on turn 3 off Opus is really nice. And additionally, once we do have the apparatus in play, it will just keep discounting the Opus as the game goes on. So we can just, you know, later in the game hardcast this for 4, 5 or 6 mana, which is so strong. You know, I've had games where I've got multiple apparatuses in play and managed to cast the Opus for 2 mana, which is obviously absolutely insane. So Opus works really well at giving us some acceleration and gives us a payoff for once we have the apparatus in play as well. Then Mizzix's Mastery, potentially the other most important card in the deck. So obviously it does work very well with the Opus, but the main reason that we're interested in it in this deck is because of the overload. So we can overload this for 8 mana to cast every single instant or sorcery in our graveyard, and the overload cost is also discounted by the apparatus. So if we get apparatus down on turn 4, we can overload Mizzix's Mastery as early as turn 6, which is really strong because the way this deck plays out is you're basically interacting in the early turns, and then if we can overload this on turn 6, we get all of the interaction again. A lot of our interaction like Divide by Zero or Supreme Will also works as card advantage if we want. And we also get to cast any Magma Opuses we've discarded along the way. So the overload on this is basically our main win condition. So if you're at parity, it just completely pulls you ahead. And because we have so much early interaction that we can recast off this, it's also really good at enabling you to win from behind, which is huge as well. So Mizzix's Mastery, really good with Opus, and then the overload is kind of our main win condition outside of that. Then the other cards in the deck will start off at the bottom of the curve with Fiery Impulse. So this is really, really important as early interaction, especially important right now because of decks like Mono Green Devotion. Being able to take out Llanowar Elves on turn 1 is super important, and it's very, very easy for us to turn on the Spell Mastery on this because outside of Apparatus, every single other non-land card in the deck is an instant or sorcery, so it's very easy for us to get this dealing 3 damage, which then enables us to kill stuff like Dreadhorde Arcanist or Symmetry Sage against Wizards, which is really important. Also enables us to kill Crucius before it activates, which is really, really strong against the Rakdos Arcanist deck, against the Rakdos Midrange deck. So Fiery Impulse, very, very good as early interaction. Now, it doesn't get discounted by Apparatus, but like I said, early interaction is super important in the format in general, and particularly in a control deck. So I really like 4 Fiery Impulse for our early game interaction. Then we've got 4 copies of Molten Impact, so again, one of the best removal spells in the format. We're not running any main deck sweepers, so having Molten Impact act as a 2-for-1 against the go wide decks is particularly important. You know, stuff like humans, merfolk, goblins, stuff like that. And then getting it discounted immediately to 1 mana off the apparatus is really huge. You know, casting Molten Impact for 1 mana is so powerful. Then we've got 4 copies of Jwari Disruption, so this is very important because we need to be running a very high land count in the deck. We need to be hitting our 4th land on curve as often as possible. So if we look at the lands here, we're running 22 lands plus Seagate Restoration and Shatterskull Smashing and for Jwari Disruption. So we're actually running 28 lands, which, like I said, is very, very important to be able to hit our 4th land on curve. And Jwari Disruption is nice because it's a way for us to mitigate flood, essentially. You know, some games we're just going to have enough lands, and we can use Jwari Disruption as early interaction. Since we want to be running quite expensive spells to be able to get a good discount off Apparatus, our curve is also generally quite high outside of that. So having Jwari Disruption as another play to make in the early game is very important. And additionally, it's very important to be able to break serve if we're going second, right? If we're up against Rakdos Midrange, for example, being able to use this to counter a Fable of the Mirror Breaker or a Crucius when we're going second is very nice as well. So Jwari Disruption makes sure that we have enough land while also giving us extra interaction, and it's discounted by the Apparatus as well. You know, Jwari Disruption for 1 mana is no joke once we get the Apparatus online, and the fact that we can discount stuff to 1 mana off the Apparatus immediately is really huge. You know, the other main way I've seen people brewing with this card, especially in Pioneer, is with extra turns, which makes a lot of sense. And I do think, you know, if there were good quality extra turn spells in Historic, I would definitely be going down that route as well. But in Historic right now, Time Warp isn't legal. Obviously, if Time Warp was legal, I would definitely be running it in this deck. And the best option we have outside of that is Auron's Epiphany, but we still have the nerfed version of Auron's Epiphany in Historic, so we don't get the 1/1 tokens unless we foretell, which is a pretty big issue because in this particular deck, we are kind of light on win conditions, so not getting the 1/1s unless we foretell it isn't that great. And additionally, I think Historic is generally faster than Pioneer and Explorer, and so having a bunch of 7 mana cards that you can't, you know, use like Magma Opus that we can discard in the early game does mean that you can end up with clunky hands. Like if we look at this deck, Magma Opus is obviously expensive, but we can discard it early, and outside of that, the most expensive cards are 4 mana, so generally we're much lower curve and much easier to interact in the early game, which I think is important in a format as fast as Historic. So, and then at the 3-drop slot, we've got Divide by Zero and Supreme Will. So before I talk about these cards specifically, I want to address why I'm not running good quality cards like Archmage's Charm and Expressive Iteration, because those are both cards that are incredibly powerful on their own, but they don't really work that well with Mindsplice Apparatus. And because we're building our whole deck around this card, we really want to make benefit of this no matter what cards we have in our hand. And it would be very awkward if you flash in a Mindsplice Apparatus and then you just have a bunch of Archmage's Charms and Expressive Iterations that don't give you any discount whatsoever. So even though Iteration and Archmage's Charm are 2 of the best cards in these colours, I don't think we want to be running them in this deck because we really want our deck to be able to basically transform once we have the Apparatus in play, considering we're basically building our whole deck around it, if that makes sense. Additionally, with Archmage's Charm, we probably couldn't afford to run as many red lands, which would mean it's kind of awkward to cast Fiery Impulse on turn 1, for example. So as things stand, I actually prefer running Divide by Zero and Supreme Will for that reason. Now, Divide by Zero is great because if we have Apparatus in play, after 2 turns, this costs 1 mana, which is really huge, and it just acts as a catch-all answer. You know, we can interact with stuff on the stack, which is very important against decks, you know, like Control or Mono Green Devotion, stopping their Cavaliers and Storm the Festivals and stuff, and we also get to learn. So if we look at the sideboard, we've got Environmental Sciences, which enables us to grab a land, and again, these cards are discounted by the Apparatus, so if Divide by Zero costs 1 mana, the Environmental Sciences is free, Teachings of the Archaics is 1 mana, Start from Scratch is also 1 mana, so Divide by Zero, once we have Apparatus in play, gives us such good mana efficiency once we activate it. So, like I said, Environmental Sciences is very good at making sure that we keep hitting land drops, and the life gain is very relevant in certain matchups. Teachings of the Archaics is probably the most powerful lesson that we can get off Divide by Zero because it just allows us to draw more cards, especially once we have Apparatus in play. You know, we can Divide by Zero, and since we're bouncing something that the opponent's got back to their hand, they're more likely to have more cards in their hand than we do. Then we can get a Teachings of the Archaic, cast it for 1 mana to draw 2, and then we can, you know, oftentimes just cast whatever we draw because everything is discounted as well. So Divide by Zero, you know, it's a fine card when we don't have the Apparatus, and then really pops off when we do have it as well, which is really nice. Then Supreme Will, you know, largely worse than the Archmage's Charm, but the fact it gets discounted by the Mindsplice Apparatus, and we can cast this for 1 mana after 2 oil counters is really huge. So counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 is going to do the job, you know, the Archmage's Charm would do in the early game anyway. You know, it only really gets a lot worse as the game goes late and the opponent gets more stuff in play, but as the game goes on, we're probably going to be winning anyway because we usually have Mindsplice Apparatus in play. We also have Magma Opus Mizzix's Mastery. You know, we can often just overload the Mizzix's Mastery anyway, so the weakness of Supreme Will being bad in the late game is kind of mitigated by the deck in general having such a strong late game anyway. And then we can also just look at the top 4 and put one into our hand, which is particularly important with the Mizzix's Mastery. I mean, we can use this to try and find the Mindsplice Apparatus if we don't have it, but the key thing with Divide by Zero and Supreme Will here is they still give us good value off the Mizzix's Mastery, even if the opponent doesn't have anything in play or on the stack. Because the weakness of running something just like a Saw It Coming or just a regular counterspell is, if we overload the Mizzix's Mastery, we don't actually get any value off it. So Supreme Will being a counterspell that we can also just use for value off the Mastery ensures that we're always going to get value off the overload, which kind of counts as our main win condition, if that makes sense. Then Big Score, one of the other most important cards in the deck. So this is just decent on rate, discarding a card, drawing 2 and creating 2 treasure tokens not only allows us to ramp into, being able to hardcast the overload without the apparatus, or being able to hardcast the magma overs potentially. It's a fine card when we don't have the apparatus in play, but once we do have apparatus, this card completely pops off. Casting this for 2 mana basically pays for itself because we get the 2 treasures straight away, and then as we have 3 all counters on it, we can cast this for 1 mana. Then at that point, we're discarding the worst card, drawing 2, and ramping for 1 as well. So Big Score is great at just ensuring that we don't run out of gas. Producing extra treasure tokens is also very nice because if we don't have the apparatus, or the opponent has killed the apparatus, for example, we have extra mana available for us to just hardcast our spells normally anyway. So Big Score, really, really powerful when we have the apparatus, and kind of substitutes for it in a way when we don't have it as well. So those are the most important cards in the main deck. In terms of the mana base, nothing too special going on here really. We've got 1 Hall of Storm Giants, 1 Den of the Bugbear as additional win conditions because, like I said, the deck is kind of light on ways to close the game out. If the opponent, if we don't cast the Magma Opus, for example, then we don't really have that many good ways of closing the game out. So Hall of Storm Giants and Den of the Bugbear give us another win condition. And Otawara and Sokenzan are basically free to run as one-offs, and then outside of that, just the good quality blue-red dual lands, and then Seagate Restoration and Shatterskull Smashing are nice to run as one-offs that also give us value when they're discounted by the apparatus. Shatterskull Smashing acts as just extra interaction, and then Seagate Restoration can be really powerful once it's discounted as well, and then we can cast it again from the Mizzix's Mastery in the graveyard to draw a bunch of cards as well. So these cards, similar to Dry Disruption, are nice and just ensuring that we consistently hit our 4th land drop on curve, and also gives us some utility when we flood out as well, particularly when we have the Mindsplice Apparatus in play. So that's the main deck. I've been really happy with it so far. I do think this is the best way to build it in Historic, because I don't really feel like the quality of the extra 10 spells in Historic right now are good enough to warrant it, and having to run, full Auron's Epiphany in the deck is going to lead to some clunky hands where you just get run over by stuff like wizards. So I do like this setup in the main deck so far, and it has felt like the best way to build around apparatus in Historic anyway. Then Sideboard, we've obviously gone over the lessons. There is a 5 mana lesson that deals with any problematic permanent. The opponent does get to draw a card off it, but I basically found myself never finding that. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention as well is Start from Scratch off Divide by Zero. This card is actually a really important card to be able to get because since Mizzix's Mastery is our main win condition and it involves interacting with the graveyard, the deck is kind of soft to graveyard hate, but the vast majority of graveyard hate run in the format is artifact based, particularly unlicensed hearse. So we can use Divide by Zero to find Start from Scratch, which allows us to destroy the unlicensed hearse, which is particularly important. Now, Graveyard Hate definitely isn't lights out against our deck. It does stop the Mizzix's Mastery, but, we can often just go for Magma Opus to kill the opponent, or we can use Divide by Zero to get Mascot Exhibition, which is the other card that I forgot to mention when I was talking about Divide by Zero. So this is really nice because it just gives us another way to close the game out. Like I said, we are kind of light on win conditions outside of the Opus, so Mascot Exhibition being a way to produce a bunch of tokens to just close the game out is really sick. It also gets discounted by the apparatus, and we can flash it back off the Mastery as well. So Divide by Zero gives us a ton of utility and gives us additional win conditions out the sideboard as well. Then in terms of actual sideboard cards, we've got 4 copies of Mystical Dispute, which is really nice against the control decks. Against control, we typically want to board out Fiery Impulse because the weakness of this card over Unholy Heat is that it can't kill Planeswalkers, so definitely a card that we want to swap out against control. And Mystical Dispute is a really, really great card in the mirror match because we can use this to obviously counter the opponent's like Teferis and stuff and Nar sets, but we can also use it to defend our apparatus as it's coming down. We can wait until 5 mana, flash in the apparatus, then if the opponent tries to counter it, we can use Dispute to counter it as well. And then once we have apparatus in play, even if we're if the opponent's not casting blue spells, it still discounts the Mystical Dispute. So if the opponent's casting like a Wandering Emperor, for example, the Mystical Dispute itself will be countered as well. So Dispute, really important for the control matchups. Additionally, I'm running 2 Commence the Endgame as another card for control as well, because While Molten Impact isn't the worst card in the control matchup, it's also not great. You know, it's only really good once the opponent has resolved the Planeswalker, which is usually when you're behind anyway. So I also cut 2 Molten Impact for to commence the endgame, which can't be countered, so the opponent can't do anything about it. Discounted by the Apparatus, draws us 2 cards, and creates another, you know, a big token as well. Now, the one downside of this is that the opponent can steal the token with Archmage's Charm, but in general, this is like the best top-end spell that we can run against control, mainly because it can't be countered, right? The weakness of running expensive spells in that matchup is if the opponent has a counter spell for it, you're super far behind on that exchange, but the fact this can't be countered means it's kind of a trump card in that matchup as well. And then finally, we've got 4 copies of Brotherhood's End for the creature deck, so typically I'll board out of some number of Supreme Will to bring this in, and this is just obviously important, first of all, against the go wide aggro decks. Now, Fiery Impulse and Molten Impacts can often just get you there against the aggro decks, but particularly against a deck like Elves, where they go wide really fast, or you know, Merfolk, where they also have their own counter spells. Brotherhood's End is important there as well. And then the main reason that I'm running 4 is because it's also very important against the artifact decks like Affinity and Thopters, particularly because against Affinity, your damage-based removal isn't particularly good against stuff like Nettlecyst. So having Brotherhood's End as a way to suit the board of artifacts is really, really important in that matchup as well. So that's the deck. I've had a ton of fun playing with this. I've really enjoyed playing the deck, and it has felt, you know, I've tried a bunch of different shells with Apparatus, some in control, some with extra turn spells, and this has definitely felt like the best build so far. However, the weaknesses of the deck, obviously one of the big weaknesses of running a deck where you're built around a single card is your deck does kind of perform under par when you don't have the Apparatus, which is kind of frustrating. Now, we do have Opus Mastery, like I said, as another way to do something really powerful when we don't have the Apparatus, but if the opponent has a way to deal with the Apparatus, like a Thoughtseize or whatever, you are kind of playing a generally worse control deck than something like blue-white control, for example. Speaking of blue-white control, I also feel like this deck kind of has the same matchup spreads as blue-white control as well. So you're still weak to stuff like humans, you're still weak to stuff like Rakdos Midrange because of all the discard spells. So I'm not really sure that this is a better option than blue-white control because, you know, when you have the Apparatus, the deck is significantly stronger, but when you don't, it's just generally like a worse version of blue-white control. If we compare the Apparatus to something like the Wandering Emperor, which is kind of a similar thing, you know, they're both 4-mana cards with flash. The really strong thing about Wandering Emperor is it's good if the opponent is doing stuff proactively, right? One problem I've had with this deck is it can actually be difficult to get the Apparatus down. If the opponent's doing powerful stuff that you have to counter with Supreme Will or Divide by Zero, then we don't actually get the Apparatus in play that early, which is a big issue. So those are the 2 main issues that I've had with the deck. It has the same matchup spreads as blue-white control, and I'm not sure it's better than blue-white control at what it does. And the second issue is the deck can kind of perform under par when we don't have the Apparatus, which does make it particularly weak to discard spells and counter spells, stuff that stops your Apparatus entering play, basically. So those are the main issues I've had with the deck. Ways to address that going forwards, I'm not really sure, to be honest, because you know, I don't think there's a good way to build this deck without running a bunch of instants and sorceries, which naturally makes you weak to Rakdos Midrange because you don't commit to the board very quickly, so counter spells are good against you. All of the stuff that you want to use is going to be sat in your hand for the most part. And it also makes you kind of weak to stuff like Esper Sentinel and Thalia as well. So I'm not really sure there's a good way to fix that problem. Definitely let me know in the comments if you've got any suggestions for that. And then the second thing is, you know, the deck being not as strong without the Apparatus. Again, I'm not really sure there's a great way because there aren't really good ways to tutor it. We could run more cards in the early game to search for the Apparatus, you know, stuff like Impulse Effects or Consider or whatnot, but I'm not really sure there's room for that, to be honest. So, but having said that, you know, I still think that the cards in the deck are reasonably good without the Apparatus, right? Fiery Impulse and Molten Impact are great cards on their own. Divide by Zero and Supreme Will are probably a little under par for what you would play in Historic, but they're still, you know, serviceable cards. They're not embarrassing to play in Historic. And then Opus and Mastery are really strong. Big Score is also pretty reasonable on its own as well. So it's not like the deck is awful when you don't have the Apparatus, but compared to a deck like Blue-White Control, like the non-Lotus filled versions where all of their cards are consistently good, it does lead to, you know, some situations where if you don't have the Apparatus, it's not as strong. Now, having said that, there are, you know, stuff going for this deck that Blue-White Control doesn't have. The burst you get out of Opus Mastery is something that Blue-White Control doesn't really have access to. But on the flip side, that does also make this deck slightly more vulnerable to Graveyard Hate. So there are definitely strengths and weaknesses compared to a similar deck like Blue-White Control. So if you have any suggestions for ways to improve the deck to help fix some of those issues, definitely let me know in the comments. Next up, I've just got some matches so you guys can see the deck in action. I've only got 2 matches this time because both of them were really long, but I thought they were both both interesting to showcase. So the first match I'm going to show you is with a slightly older build of the deck where I was running Brotherhood's End in the main deck over 2 Dry Disruption, and I think that game should be a good way to highlight that you need to be running a high land count in this deck to consistently hit your 4th land for your important 4-mana spells. So that match is with a slightly older build of the deck with fewer lands, and then the second match is with this list, you know, once it had been modified to add more lands to it. So anyway, if you've got any questions about the deck at all, or you've got any ways that you could think you could potentially improve it, definitely let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up! Okay, sweet, so we're on the play here, and yeah, I think this hand's pretty good, you know, only got 2 lands, so we will need to draw a few more off the top, but you know, we're running a decently high land count, so I think that's pretty likely. And we do have early interaction, which is super important against a ton of matchups. Okay, particularly against the, you know, an Elvish Mystic deck. So interesting whether we want to go for Molten Impact or Fiery Impulse here. I'm kind of inclined to go for Molten Impact because it's slightly more mana efficient. And if they have a second one, we can just go for Supremal to try and find the 4th land and then kill another one with the excess damage. We'll see what they do here. Okay, Paradise Druid's a little bit annoying. It would have been the same issue with Wolfwillow Haven though, so unfortunately, we have to pass it, and unless they play... yeah, I was going to say unless they play like another elf, we're probably not going to make good use of the excess damage here. I think, unfortunately, even though we would love to use Supremal to try and dig for the 4th land, we definitely need to counter the Old Growth Troll here for a number of reasons. You know, it's a 4/4 creature we'd have to deal with eventually. We've already used Molten Impact, so we don't have a way to kill it. And even if we did kill it with Molten Impact, it would still give them Devotion. Oh, wow, we missed the 4th land. That's rough. I mean, I am running 26 lands in this build, so maybe I'm, you know, I've been thinking about going up to 28 for a while. You know, I was having to run 29 in my Karuga deck. Again, I'm going to have to counter our Ghost Troll here for the same reason as last turn, but we do have some very important 4-mana spells to be able to cast. Like, not being able to cast Apparatus on curve, again, is really rough. So I think after this game, I'm probably going to go up to 28, try and find room for some more Dry Disruptions. Thankfully, we have Divide by 0 to slow them down a little bit more, but had we been able to cast Mindsplice Apparatus this turn or last turn, I think we'd be so far ahead. So this game, wow, we missed it again. This game probably highlights why I think, you know, I've been thinking for a while playing this deck, I need to go up to 28 lands. So this game kind of highlights why I think, you know, we're not in a terrible position right now, but we're definitely we're definitely behind because we missed the 4th land. So yeah, I think after this game, I'm definitely going to make that change. Okay, so opponent does get Cavalier in play. I mean, we do have Apparatus and Mizzix's Mastery, so as long as we can get Apparatus down next turn, I think we've got a good chance. You know, the great thing about Mizzix's Mastery, or overloading Mizzix's Mastery, is it gives you a way to win from behind, which is very important. But yeah, I mean, it's very... Mono Green can have some absolutely insane turns, so I'm not holding my breath that that'll be able to get us there. Okay, Cavalier and not Storm the Festival is reasonable. Just got to hope they don't hit Nykthos here. Okay, they don't hit Nykthos. That's a good sign. And we do get to get Apparatus in play here, hopefully. Wow, another Paradise Druid. So they have a lot of power in play. What we're staring down 14 damage here, which is pretty rough. Okay, another land is nice. So we've got a few options here. We can potentially kill one of the Cavaliers to slow the opponent down a little bit, but I'm not really sure that's good enough. You know, especially because they can just put Storm the Festival on top of the library. I really want to try and set up for a big Mizzix's Mastery overload. So I'm kind of tempted to lead on big score here, but that does involve pitching one of our removal spells. Maybe it was better to hold on to the land and pitch that to big score, but in case the opponent has Khan, I think it's very important to keep playing lands so that we can manually overload the Mastery. Okay, Brotherhood's End is a great draw here. So now this takes out both the Paradise Druids, and enables us to kill one of the Cavalier of Thorns with the Fiery Impulse as well. And then as long as the opponent doesn't have Khan, we can overload the Mizzix's Mastery and hopefully get back into this game. But like I said, you know, had we hit the 4th land on curve earlier, I think we would be like significantly further ahead now. Right, we wouldn't have to be so defensive. We could, you know, play more to set up the Mizzix's Mastery. We probably would have overloaded the Mizzix's Mastery by now, whereas now we're very vulnerable to Khan, because if they play Khan, we can't use the treasures, and if they do play Khan, they can get Haywire Might to kill the Apparatus as well. So I've just got my fingers crossed they don't have Khan here. Okay, they go for another Cavalier. That's huge. So as long as they don't hit Nykthos here, they can't. They do hit Nykthos. So just got to pray they don't have a Khan in hand. Oh, they do. Okay, that is really rough because I assume they get Haywire Might here. And then even though we're close to hardcasting the Overload on Mizzix's Mastery, we're a land short, right? You know, we only have 7 lands available, so... I mean, hopefully... I was going to say hopefully they don't get Haywire Might, but now they do. They can kill the Apparatus. We can't use the treasures, so... And so here, missing that 4th land has really cost us, because had we hit our land drops on curve, we probably would have already cast the Mastery by now. So yeah, we're 1 mana short. And we're dead on board to the lair. So I think my only out here is to pass the turn, use the Otawara to bounce one of their creatures, and then hope to draw another land to overload the Mastery. I mean, there's a chance the opponent doesn't use the lair here. If they don't, then that's great. We can just hold on to the Otawara to guarantee the land, and then we can have an extra card in hand to pitch to big score in the graveyard, which is very important. But yeah, I mean, Khan could get tons of stuff to close the game out here. They could get Cityscape Leveler. They could get God Pharaoh's Statue, would be awful for us. They could get Portal to Phyrexia. Or they could get something cheap and then fire up the lair. I mean, we'll see what they get here. Wow, they get Stonebrain. Do they know we're playing Mizzix's Mastery? I'd be pretty impressed if the opponent manages to identify that Mizzix's Mastery is the key card in our deck here. I mean, I guess this does enable them to, you know, do a proactive play and animate lair. So I've just got to hope the opponent doesn't name Mizzix's Mastery here, or we're just completely dead. But I don't know what they would name if they weren't going to name Mizzix's Mastery. Well, they named Molten Impacts. I mean, that's surprising. That feels like a bit of a waste of a Karn activation, but that is actually pretty rough for us, because we would have been able to completely clean up the entire board of the opponents if we have the Molten Impacts in the graveyard, right? Because with the Molten Impacts, we can bounce the Cavalier with Divide by 0, use Brotherhood's End to take out the Karn, use Molten Impacts to take out the Cavalier and the Old Growth Troll, and then still have excess damage to potentially kill the lair of the Hydra. Oh wow, they didn't animate the lair. Okay, that must have been a misclick from the opponent, surely. So I'm going to hold on to the Otawara here. Okay, we would have been fine because we would have drawn an extra land anyway, but... yeah, them taking the Molten Impacts is actually pretty bad for us here, because that means that they're going to be left with a Cavalier in play. Now, we do get to dig for more cards off the Big Score and the Supreme Will here, and we get access to the treasures once the Khan dies, so definitely going to use Divide by 0 to bounce the Cavalier of Thorns for sure. And then Brotherhood's End is going to kill the Khan and not the Old Growth Troll, unfortunately. Environmental Sciences... I mean, we have both the basic island and the mountains, so we're only going to gain 2 life off that, but it is what it is. Then Supreme Will going to dig us for cards. I'm going to have the Supreme Will resolve after the Big Score, so we can make a more informed decision off that. And then Fiery Impulse. We can't... I'm just going to make sure that I've got the triggers set up right. Now, unfortunately, since we exiled all of the instances of sorceries from our graveyard, the Fiery Impulse is only dealing 2 here, so I was thinking we could maybe kill the Cavalier of Thorns with the Impulse, but it's only dealing 2 damage, so we have to take out the Old Growth Troll here instead. So, I think I have to try and find another removal spell to kill the Cavalier. Okay, we found a Fiery Impulse, so that's a start, right? We can use that to kill the Cavalier of Thorns after the Brotherhood's End, but we're still dead to the lair. I mean, maybe Magma Opus is better. I'm not 100% sure on that choice there. Then we get to gain 2 off the Environmental Sciences. So we can kill all of their creatures, but again, we're dead to the lair. I've just got to hope the opponent misses it, I think. Because what we can do here is... Divide by 0, we could discard a card, but... instead, what I think is better to do is grab a spell here, a sorcery from the lessons. Then we can pitch that to Big Score, and then we have two instants or sorceries in the graveyard, so Fire Impulse deals 3 damage, which allows us to kill the Cavalier. I'm just trying to think which of these is best to have in the graveyard. And I think it's between Mascot Exhibition and Introduction to Annihilation, because if we pitch Mascot Exhibition to the graveyard, if we then draw a Mizzix's Mastery, we can then make a bunch of tokens. So I think I'm going to go for the Mascot Exhibition here. And then I think we have to go Big Score, pitch the Mascot Exhibition, get Spell Mastery online for the Fiery Impulse, kill the Cavalier, and then just hope that my opponent doesn't fire up the lair. I mean, they get another Cavalier trigger here, right? So I imagine they put either Khan or Storm the Festival on top. I mean, this does mean that Nykthos doesn't tap for that much, but, you know, they've got more than lethal on the lair. I mean, I guess we're representing Fading Hope, bouncing the lair of the Hydra or something, but if the opponent casts Khan, they can go Khan, fire up the lair, and then Khan stops us using the treasure anyway, so we're still dead to the lair here, I think. But, I mean, again, there's a chance the opponent might not see it, right? I've definitely done that in the past where I have lethal off of a creature land and just got lost in the source doing proactive stuff and not attacked. Wow, they go for Chalice of the Void. Interesting. Maybe they think we're a low-cost spell deck, maybe. I mean, if they tap out for Chalice here, oh, wow. Now Lair of the Hydra is not lethal. Okay, we actually have a chance in this game now. That was huge. I mean, obviously that was a mistake on the opponent's part. And now they see the lair. Yeah, okay. But, I mean, I've definitely done that in the past. So Magma Opus here can kill the Khan. And potentially draw us... What could we draw to stop the lair? I mean... What could we draw here? Actually, wait, what? Hold on. No, okay, I'm being stupid, my bad. We can just fire off Magma Opus during the upkeep here, and then we can kill the Khan and tap down both the lair and the Nykthos, which really slows down the opponent's ability to develop here. So, go to their upkeep. Now we'll fire off the Magma Opus. 3 to the Khan, 1 to face, and then we can tap down the lair and the Nykthos here. And then, yeah, make sure we deal 3 to the Khan. And now the opponent only has access... Well, I say only. They've got access to 8 mana, but we're not dead to the lair is the most important thing. You know, stabilizing at 2 is pretty rough here. So we're going to have to be very, very careful from this point onwards. Wow, they accidentally tapped the... Wow, they just essentially wasted 2 mana there. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if they're planning to just cast the Cavalier here anyway. Right. Oh, well, they just drew a Storm the Festival. I mean, I think that's fine. I think we're actually in a good spot now. You know, we've got Apparatus, we've got another Magma Opus, so again, we can... Oh, well, they hit another lair. I was going to say we can tap down their lair and the Nykthos again here. But, I mean, we can hold back the 4/4 to block, but if they find a way to kill the 4/4, then we're just dead to the lair. So I think I'm better off attacking with the 4/4 here and using the Magma Opus to tap down both the lairs. Now, that does mean that they get access to the Nykthos, but I think that's better than risking them potentially finding a way to kill the 4/4, like getting a Khan and getting a Cityscape level to kill the 4/4 and then being dead to lair. So I think this plays around more stuff. So we can kill the Llanowar Elves, which, even though they still have access to Nykthos, will reduce the amount of devotion, so they're not getting as much mana off it. So go 3 to face, 1 to the Llanowar Elves, tap down both the lairs here. Now again, maybe it was better to hold back the 4/4, but I also feel like I'd quite like to start closing the game out as well. You know, we're suddenly on the front foot again, and we drew another Mizzix's Mastery. Okay, that is huge. So now we can potentially overload the Mizzix's Mastery. We've got 2 Magma Opuses and the Mascot Exhibition in the grave, so as long as they don't go Khan into Tormod's Crypt here, I think we're actually in a good spot. Okay, they get Kiora and Paradise Druid, so unfortunately Paradise Druid we can't tap down, so we're just short of lethal here. Now, we do have more than enough mana to overload the Mastery, so we could play like a big score first to fill the graveyard up a bit more, but I think I prefer just overloading the Mizzix's Mastery straight away, and then we still have mana open for Divide by Zero. You know, if we draw another Divide by Zero, we potentially have mana open for 2 Divide by Zeros, just to ensure the opponent doesn't have any outs here. So we can lead on big score, discarding the Sokenzan here. Then we can Opus. I don't think we care about the Kiora at all. I just want to deal damage face and try and close the game out. Again, I don't think it really matters what we tap here. So we go 4 to face. 4 to face again. Get 2 4/4s in play. Then Fiery Impulse Cut doesn't really do anything here because it can't kill Planeswalkers, and Paradise Druid obviously has Hexproof. So get the Mascot Exhibition. 4 to face. Get another 4/4. And we get to draw a bunch of cards as well. And then we get big score as well. And then we can force them to chump with the Paradise Druid and put them down to 2 here. Oh, wait, I messed up. We could have won this turn if I'd planned things out a little better. If I'd manually tapped to not tap down the Den of the Bugbear, I could have used the treasure tokens off the big score to animate the Den and attack for lethal. So that was my bad. If I'd stopped and thought about the big... Because I wasn't accounting for the big score mana there. So yeah, I should have tapped a little differently and we could have won with the Den there. But having said that, I think I'm pretty confident that we're still good to win here, right? We've got Divide by Zero and Supreme Will. Now, I could, you know, that could be a costly mistake if the opponent does have an insane turn here. You know, if they get like multiple Nykthoses and then, you know, get like a Karn Silex that we can't counter or something, we could be in trouble. You know, if I divide by 0 but then can't Supreme Will it. Oh wow, they counter their own Llanowar Elves. But yeah, I mean, they could hit Karn, get Karn Silex, untap it with Kiora, and then sweep everything. So I really hope they don't do that, because then we get punished for not firing up Den last turn. I mean, even if they do that... Oh, they do have the Karn. So, I mean, to be honest, some builds aren't running the Silex. I think we're better off not countering the Karn. Well, I mean, if we divide by 0, they can just cast the Karn again, so I don't really think that achieves much. I'm definitely going to crack all the treasures before Karn enters play, though, because otherwise we don't have access to both Divide by 0 and Supreme Will. So, just got to hope they don't Karn Silex here, because if they do, that... Oh, maybe they don't have enough mana. Oh, they could just activate it for X equals 0 and kill all the tokens, right? But like I said, not every build is running Karn Silex, so... Ah, they got Platinum Angel. I mean, that's not good enough, because we can just... Wow, they tap out for Storm the Festival. I guess... I mean, that is a surprise. We can just counter that, right? And then we can... We still have Divide by 0 up. Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, we shouldn't have won that, but we played to our outs and got there, so... So here, against Devotion, even though Brotherhood's End was nice there, I don't think it's particularly great in this matchup overall. I think out of the options in the sideboard, probably want a few more counter spells, I think. You know, I mean, Brotherhood's End is okay if the opponent has a very mana dork heavy start, but they're not always going to have that, right? So... I think extra counter spells is slightly more valuable. But having said that, I mean, after that game, I think the change I'm going to make after this is swapping out the 2 Brotherhood's Ends for 2 more Jwari Disruptions, because I haven't felt like Brotherhood's End in the main deck, when we have 4 Fire Impulse, 4 Molten Impact, is that necessary, if that makes sense. And in that case, I think the main deck would be pretty well set up against Devotion, so I'm not sure you would sideboard anyway. But yeah, I think having thought about it a little bit more, in a deck where you need to hit your 4th land on curve, 26 lands just isn't enough, so I'm definitely going to go up to at least 28. Okay, so Cure is a little bit awkward. We can't Jwari Disruption it, unfortunately. We can Magma Opus here, and we can guarantee Mindsplice Apparatus on turn 4, which is nice. The downside here is we are against Devotion, and there are a lot of stuff... There's a lot of stuff they could cast here that we would have to counter, which means that we're slower to develop the Apparatus. So this is... I'm not 100% sure on this, right? I feel like if they have Nykthos, that's absolutely a snap counter. If they don't, then I think it's worth flashing in the Mindsplice Apparatus, but I feel like since, you know, they only have like 1 card left in hand now, so I think I would rather run them out of threats and then get the Apparatus down than just getting it down as early as possible, but I'm still not 100% sure. Apparatus is definitely a card that's best the earliest you get it down, but... Devotion is also a deck that snowballs really hard if you don't stop their early threats, so I think countering there is right, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, they untapped. Okay, they've got a Karn. I mean, unfortunately, we can Supreme Will and Jwari Disruption it, which I think is good. I mean, it's not good, but I think it's the right play. And then... Just gotta hope they don't top deck well, basically. Okay, they do pay the 3, then we can just Jwari. I mean, especially because they have Llanowar Elves and Nykthos, I don't mind that, because we're not getting any more value off the Jwari as the game goes on, really. That's the best use we're going to make out of it, other than to play it as a land, obviously. So as long as the opponent doesn't draw anything particularly good this turn, then we can just flash in the Mindsplice Apparatus and we should be good. Oh wow, another Khan. So that's rough. Like, all we needed is to phase one draw step there, and I think we would have been in a good spot. So that's pretty unfortunate. I mean, we still get to get the Apparatus down here, but... Okay, Tormod's Crypt, sure. That's a little bit annoying. We don't have Mastery, though, so we're not too fussed. But yeah, I mean, them having Khan in play when we have big score as one of our cards in hand is a bit annoying because it means we don't get access to the treasures. But as Mindsplice Apparatus ticks up, it's going to be good. Now, the other annoying thing here is that the opponent obviously could get Haywire Might off the Khan. Now, I'm not sure whether it's right to pitch the Magma Opus here or not. I feel like one of the ways we could win from this point is hardcasting the Magma Opus, but with the opponent having a Khan in play, we're not really going to have access to the treasures here, so again, the opponent could very well get Haywire Might. Oh, well, they get Stone Brain. Maybe they name Mizzix's Mastery here, now that they know that that's kind of our big payoff. I mean, having said that, they've already got a Tormod script in play, so that feels a bit overkill, right? They already have our graveyard on lock, so getting rid of... Oh, they get the Magma Opus, of course, yeah. So they know that's our big spell that we're casting off the Mizzix Mastery. But again, I don't like that play really because we still have Mascot Exhibition. We still have creature lands, right? It's not like they've taken out our only way to win the game. And Magma Opus is honestly pretty clunky right now, right? They have our treasures on lock, so we're not really hard casting it. And they have our graveyard on lock, so we're not using Mizzix's Mastery on it either. Oh, okay. Molten Impact is nice. Now we can kill the Khan. So now we actually have our treasures back online again. So if we can draw a Divide by 0, we're actually in a pretty good spot. Now, I'm not going to play anything out from my hand here because I want to hold on to Jory just in case we can counter something. And I want to hold on to Stormcarved Coast in case we draw another big score. I mean, to be honest, we could probably pitch the Jory Disruption. I very much doubt, you know, it's face up, so the opponent knows it's there. And they have so much mana that I might as well start playing it as a land, to be honest. But I definitely want to hold at least one card in my hand in case we draw a big score. Ah, well, they got a Cavalier. Yikes. Okay, so, I mean, opponent is obviously definitely ahead here now, but we do have a lot of good draws, right? We've got Mindsplice Apparatus on 2, so if we can chain a bunch of spells together, we're actually in a pretty good spot here. Okay, so opponent gets a Cavalier, they get to draw, and they get another land in play as well. Okay, interesting they choose not to go for Lair. I guess they're hoping to draw another card they can use with Nykthos. Wow, and there's another Khan. Yikes. Okay, I think we're really, really far behind now. Wow, they choose not to play the Khan. They have enough mana, right? Because they can tap Llanowar Elves and Lair to activate the Nykthos. Huh, okay. Fiery Impulse. Not the best draw here. I mean, we could use it now to take out the Llanowar Elves, but I don't really feel that's going to make that much of a difference, to be honest. Maybe that was wrong there. Maybe I was supposed to just fire it off, but I kind of want to bluff something else as well, right? Okay, no lands, but 2 Storm the Festivals is not good to see. I mean, I don't want to scoop, but I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of tempted to just concede because they already have our graveyard on lock with the Tormod's Crypt, right? But we still have outs, right? We could still draw big score, which would cost 1 mana, and then just draw a bunch of relevant stuff after that. We could still draw like big score into Divide by 0, bounce one of the Cavaliers, get start from scratch, kill the Tormod's Crypt. You know, that's like a reasonable sequence that could get us back into the game, so I don't want to concede too early here. I guess opponents in the tank whether to go for Khan or Storm the Festival here. Right, they've got enough mana to go for Storm with the Nykthos. So they've got 8 mana. Okay, they do go for the Khan. Let's see what they grab here. I mean, to be honest, they could get Haywire Might, which would just shut off basically all of our outs. They could go for Cityscape Leveler, which could, you know, again, would kill the Apparatus and basically close the game out as well. So very, very unlikely to win this one, but still got some outs, so I don't want to concede just yet. But yeah, from the opponent's point of view, well, they get Chalice again. I was going to say, like, the best cards they could get are probably Haywire Might, Cityscape Leveler, Portal to Phyrexia. Chalice on 3 seems... actually, no, wait. I guess that does shut off Divide by 0, so now we have virtually no win conditions left. Right. I guess we kill the Llanowar Elves now. And then we can use the Molten Impact to kill the Khan at least. But yeah, I mean, we could be in trouble now because... I mean, I guess we can still win off creature lands, but... Yeah, okay, we're just dead here. So that was a pretty rough game. You know, I think we had a good chance if the opponent didn't draw that Khan off the top, but, you know, that's how it goes against mono green. If you run them out of resources, you then have to apply enough pressure that you don't give them enough time to top deck, basically, because they will draw out of it eventually. So sideboarding here, just trying to think whether the disputes are actually better than the Brotherhood's End here or not. I think they are, especially on the play, right? We have enough early interaction with Fire Impulse and Molten Impact, I think. But yeah, like I said again, I'm probably going to cut the Brotherhood's End for Jawari Disruption as extra lands after this, so I don't think you would want to sideboard anyway against the against mono green, and I think I would have to find room in the sideboard for... This is another spot where I wish we were running 28 lands. If I was running 28 lands, I think this would be a confident keep that I would keep hitting land drops. Okay, this is nice. This is like more consistent. But yeah, I think I need to find room in the sideboard for the 4th Brotherhood's End because I want to run all 4 in the sideboard because it has felt very important. It's by far and away your most important card against both Affinity and a deck like Elves as well, where you just want to draw it as often as possible. Okay, no turn 1 Elf is great. We do get... hopefully we'll get Apparatus down on turn 3 this game. But yeah, another situation with that first hand we got there. With a 2-lander, if I was running 28 lands, I would be confident keeping that, whereas the current build of the 26, I'm not so sure about. Wow, okay. So we could go Apparatus, we could go Mizzix's Mastery here. I kind of like going for the Mizzix's Mastery straight away because they could very well go Khan into Tormod's Crypt, which would shut that off. And this way, kind of, since we're drawing 2, pretty likely that we'll draw the 4th land for the Apparatus. And we get board presence, we can start applying pressure, which is pretty nice as well. So we do draw the 4th land, which is, you know, very, very important. Okay, they have an Old Growth Troll here, sure. So I'm going to shock in the Steam Vents for the Apparatus here, and I don't think I want to offer the trade, just because it does ramp them, right? If they block with the Old Growth Troll, they equip it to a land, and then they have access to more mana this turn. Again, I don't think I really want to take the trade here. I like keeping Knife 4/4 in play, so that if they play a Planeswalker, they have to, you know, they're under pressure from it. Whereas if I take the trade here, I don't have anything that can pressure their Planeswalkers. We could see free mill this, but as long as they don't have Nykthos, I think it's fine. And I do want to get Mindsplice down as soon as possible. Okay, they do untap the Old Growth Troll, so we can't attack it anymore, but getting Apparatus in play on turn 4 is really good here, hopefully. Okay, Divide by 0 is very nice because we can use this to bounce the Old Growth Troll, or we could hold on to it as reactive. I'm not sure whether it's better to use it proactively or reactively here, to be honest. I think I'm just going to pass and use it to hit Storm the Festivals and Khans. Again, if we can run them out of stuff, then we're in a great spot. I don't want to use Divide by 0 and then not have it later if they use like a Storm the Festival or Khan, right? I feel the way to beat Devotion with this deck is probably just counter their impactful stuff. We can afford to take multiple hits from the Old Growth Troll. And as the game goes on and the Mindsplice Apparatus ticks up, we should start pulling even further ahead, so... Now we can get the second one in play. Things should start getting out of control even quicker. Okay, another land is obviously good. And our Divide by 0 is particularly useful because all of the spells all the lessons that we get off it will be very useful as well now. Okay, there's Nykthos. That's kind of scary with the Kiora. So I am actually pretty glad I saved the Divide by 0 now because there's a chance the Supreme Will won't be good enough because they have a ton of mana here. You know, obviously if the opponent has 10 mana, they're going to be able to pay 3 for the Supreme Will. Okay, there's a Cavalier. So I think we'll just go for Divide by Zero here. And then if they try to cast it again, oh, they have enough mana to pay for the Supreme Will, which is kind of annoying. So what do we want to get here? We could get Teachings of the Archaic, but I think they're going to empty their hand pretty quickly. Mascot Exhibition is also pretty good here. I think since Mascot Exhibition isn't, you know, it's not going to impact the board as much when they have Cavalier and Old Growth Troll. So I think I'm going to go for Teachings of the Archaic, and hopefully we can just empty our hand to the point where the Teachings does draw us cards. Oh, perfect. Okay, now we've got the Mizzix's Mastery, which is great. So I think we just let the Cavalier resolve here and then go for the Mizzix's last turn. I mean, to be honest, thinking about it, since they only have 2 cards in hand, maybe it was correct to go for the Mascot Exhibition instead. Oh, wow. Okay, 1 mana draw, Disruption, tagging Khan here is so nice. Yeah, thinking about it, maybe it was greedy because now we've drawn the Mizzix's Mastery. We could have potentially cast the Mascot Exhibition for... What would that be? We get a discount of 5, so 2 mana Mascot Exhibition, and then we could overload it again, so... Maybe we made a mistake. I mean, if we draw a land here, we still get to draw 2 off the Teachings, so... okay. That's a little bit awkward. I mean, we do get to use the Fiery Impulse first here, right? So we could go Fiery Impulse. Then... Yeah, I think we just have to go for the Overload, which only costs 3 mana here, which is insane. But yeah, I definitely think I should have gone for Mascot Exhibition instead of the Teachings, but we can still just discard it to the big score, so it's not too bad. So just trying to think about what we want to do with these cards here. So we can Fiery Impulse, killing the Paradise Druid. I think... what do we want to divide by 0 here? I mean, divide by 0ing the Cavalier is a little bit awkward because they have the Cura in play, right? Because they get to draw a card when they recast it, but I think it's just all about tempo at this point. I just want to, you know, clear the board so we don't have to worry about them pulling ahead. Or so we don't have to worry about dying, because as this game goes on, we're just going to completely pull ahead with these 2 apparatuses here. Okay, another divide by 0 is great. So now we don't have to worry about them recasting the Cavalier. So I'm pretty confident about this spot now. We're pretty far ahead, right? We bounce the Cavalier. What do we want to get? Probably Mascot Exhibition now. I probably should have got it before anyway. And then I think I'm just happy to cast the Mascot Exhibition. And then we still have mana up for both Divide by Zeros here. And the opponent only has 4 mana, 4 Devotion off the Nykthos. So even if they untap it with the Cura, I don't think they have a ton of stuff to do with it. You know, they're not going to have too much mana. So, okay, they do untap the Nykthos here. So that's 5 mana for the Cavalier. I mean, we're definitely going to use Divide by 0 here. They're still going to have access to 4 mana off the Nykthos as well. So they could have a Karn, but again, we have Divide by 0 for that. So I think at this point, I'm happy to just discard the Fiery Impulse. We don't really have great targets. We could preemptively get a start from scratch in case the opponent does go for a Karn, but I think at this point, you know, we bounce whatever else they play. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't really care about this Cura. I don't feel that's worth wasting a Divide by 0 on. But now we're at the point where the Teachings of the Archaic could actually draw us 2, which is very nice, you know. Drawing 2 when all of your spells are discounted by, it'll be like, what, 7 mana is going to be huge. Okay, so they untap the land. Apparatus ticks up to 7. Wow, okay. Another Mizzix's Mastery. So we could just bounce the Cura, but then Divide by 0 doesn't do anything off the flashback. We could just cast the Teachings of the Archaic to draw 2. I mean, I'm happy leading on Divide by 0 here, I think. And then could get 0 mana Environmental Sciences and just play the land. Could get Start from Scratch. Could get Introduction to Annihilation. Could just pitch the Teachings of the Archaic so we get it off the Mizzix's Mastery. I think I'm just going to get Introduction to Annihilation here. Make them draw a card so that Teachings of the Archaic makes us draw 4. I mean, maybe that was greedy, but I think we're just so far ahead that it's not going to matter now. Can play a big score for 1 mana. Pitch the Mindsplice Apparatus. Wow, we can cast the Seagate Restoration and then flash it all back from the graveyard as well. Now we can just overload the Mizzix's Mastery and still have mana up for Supremal and Mystical Dispute. And we get the treasures off big score as well. So yeah, we're so far ahead now. Trying to think about the order we want to do stuff in. So unfortunately, Divide by 0 doesn't do anything here because it has to have a valid target to get the learn, and we don't want to bounce our own apparatuses, obviously. So we definitely want the Mascot Exhibition. I guess we should technically put the Seagate Restoration so it resolves last on the stack so that we draw more cards, but at this point I think I'm more worried about decking out, so I don't really want to, you know, I don't want to be drawing that many cards because we could, you know, potentially deck out. So I mean, this is pretty sick now though. We've got 3 treasures available. We've got Magma Opuses that cost 2 mana. We've got another Mizzix's Mastery that we can overload for 3. We've got Supreme Wills. We don't have to worry about discarding to hand size because of the Seagate Restoration. So yeah, we're definitely going to win this now. And this is kind of the power of getting down Apparatus on turn 4. Yeah, okay, sweet. We got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second tier. And yeah, this has to be a keep, right? We got Opus Mastery and potentially a turn 3 Apparatus as well. So yeah, this is sick. Snap keep this. Bit unfortunate that we're on the draw. This is obviously a lot more powerful on the play, but we'll take it. So let's see what the opponent's on here. Okay, Haunted Ridge tapped, sure. So it could be a number of decks. Potentially Rakdos Midrange, that's a very popular deck right now. Could be Goblins though. So yeah, see what the opponent does. Definitely going to just channel or discard the Magma Opus on turn 2 here. Oh wow, Inquisition's a complete blank. You love to see that. So yeah, opponent can't do anything about any of the cards in our hand with Inquisition. See if they got like a follow-up Thoughtseize maybe. Oh, interesting. They're playing Jund. Okay, so still imagine they're on a mid-range deck though. But yeah, we're definitely just going to channel the Opus here. And even if they do have a discard spell, if they take the Mizzix's Mastery, we just play the Apparatus. If they take the Apparatus, we just play the Mastery. So opponent's in kind of a tough spot here where we have powerful plays regardless of what they do. Interesting. They just go for a Seasoned Pyromancer. So it's difficult to know now what to go for because if they didn't have a discard spell, they could very well draw one. So I could very well see an argument for just getting Apparatus in play as early as possible, but I also just think, you know, in this matchup where the opponent's playing mid-range, we're playing control, they're kind of forced into an aggressive role. So I kind of like going for Mastery now just to slow their board presence down a lot, but I don't know, it's tough. I'm kind of tempted to just get Apparatus in play on turn 3 as well because they probably don't have a way to remove it and it is the most powerful card in the deck. But like I said, you know, they're forced into an aggressive role in this matchup, so killing all of their creatures and putting a 4/4 into play that they then have to deal with at some point feels like the better play. Plus we get to draw 2, and again they're all about going for one for one, so if we can get ahead on card advantage, that's a huge deal as well. So I think that's the better line. And then even if they have a Thoughtseize now, we've drawn 2, so we've got a grip full of good cards anyway. Okay, they go for Perilous Iteration. That's a good sign. Shows they're digging for something. You know, if they had like a Shielded or something, I'm pretty sure they would just slam that instead. So yeah, I feel pretty good about our spot now. Obviously, getting turn 3 Mizzix's Mastery down is pretty sick. Croxer could be an issue here. So I never normally advocate discarding lands to Croxer, especially against, you know, mid-range decks, because you typically want to keep all your lands so that you can play everything that you draw. But with, you know, all of the cards in our hand being very good and us having lands until turn 5 at least anyway, I don't really mind discarding the Den here. I want to keep playing untapped lands so that we can keep casting stuff, especially if we get Apparatus down. Having that extra untapped source can often be the difference between casting an extra card or not, if everything's discounted. So, again, I'm not 100% sure if discarding the Den was correct there, but, you know, I feel with 5 lands we should be good. Okay, another Paralysis iteration. So, opponent's digging again here. Now, I would really love to get the Apparatus down. If they... Like, the awkward thing with Apparatus in this deck is so many decks are doing powerful things that you often have to counter instead. So it can take a little longer to get the Apparatus in play, but... and I think Liliana is one of those cards that we just have to counter, right? This 4/4 is going to be an issue for them, and I don't want them to just down-tick and then repeatedly make us discard cards. If it was anything else other than Liliana, I think I would let it through, but... I don't think it's worth getting Apparatus in play and letting them have specifically a Liliana, because, you know, Liliana is at its best against control decks like ours. So, had they played like a Crucius or something, I think we can let that live because we can just divide by 0 later. Fatal Push I'm not too worried about, right? You know, that's just a one and done effect. It's not going to stick around on the battlefield, so... Crucius, I mean, I have just said that I would let it resolve, but I feel like we just want to get ahead on tempo now. So we bounce that back. They don't have another threat. We don't give them... You know, it unlocks a lot of mana and fixes their hand, so... But, I mean, now I feel like we're ahead, you know... We've bought so much tempo that we can just... If they do cast Crucius again, we can just slam the Apparatus now, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, one thing that is difficult to know when playing this deck is when do you let something resolve and just slam the Apparatus and try and deal with it later, and when do you not? And I feel like stuff that snowballs the game like Liliana and Crucius, you probably should counter, but then again, there's so many cards like that in the format that do run away with the game that you're kind of forced to counter a lot of different things. So maybe it's correct to just slam Apparatus as early as you possibly can. It's hard to say. Okay, they go for Croxer. Interesting. So I think with 2 big scores, I'm happy to discard one of them. And then, I can't remember if they played a land for the turn. They could also play Crucius here. Okay, they do play Crucius, so pretty good turn from the opponent, but we do get Apparatus in play here, which should be pretty sick. And we've got, you know, we got a pretty stacked hand here as well, so... Okay, so we get the Apparatus down. Get everything discounted. And we should play big score first so that we don't lose the excess damage off the Molten Impact. I think I'm going to discard the Shatterskull Smashing here. Ooh, okay. Mizzix's Mastery is pretty nice. So I think we definitely want to try and overload the Mastery if possible. So I think we're just going to Molten Impact the Crucius. We're definitely going to do that. And then I think we'll just pass and discard the Apparatus to the Croxer attack. Now, I really hope they don't have a Thoughtseize. We could be in a lot of trouble if they do. If we get to untap and overload with the Mastery, I think we just win on the spot. Okay, Inquisition's fine, right? Even though the Mastery is discounted, its mana value is still 4 while it's in our hand. So they take the Teachings here. As long as they don't have another Croxer or a Thoughtseize, we should just be good to discard the Apparatus and hopefully overload the Mizzix's Mastery here. Okay, so we pitch the Apparatus. And I guess if they have a Liliana as well, we're in trouble. So we just got to hope to fade Thoughtseize, Liliana, and Croxer. Those are the 3 cards we're worried about here. Wow, okay. That's huge. So, pretty sure this just wins us the game, right? We just overload the Mastery. And we get a ton of spells here. So, trying to think the order that we do this in. So, I think we want Divide by 0 first. Definitely want to bounce the Croxer. Then we can go Supreme Will to look. You generally want to resolve the big scores before the Supreme Will so you can make a more informed decision. And then Molten Impact doesn't do anything here, neither does Shatterskull Smashing. So we get to draw 2 off the Teachings first. Then draw 2 and create 2 treasures off the big score. Another mastery is great. And then we get to Supreme Will. Interesting choice here. I think I'm going to go for another Supreme Will. Just because it's a lot cheaper. And we can use it to dig for stuff. But maybe big score's better with the lands in hand. I think we'll go Mascot Exhibition off the Divide by 0. And then, since the opponent's at 10, I think I probably want to get the Hall of Storm Giants in here. Because we could, you know, if we draw like a Mizzix a Magma Opus, we can deal 4 to face and then fire up the Hall, potentially. Okay, so opponent goes for Inquisition. I mean, the only thing it hits is Supreme Will, so it kind of makes sense for us to fire off the Supreme Will and look for something slightly more expensive so that their Inquisition does nothing. So we'll activate the Supreme Will here. Oh, okay. It's between Mizzix's Mastery and Magma Opus here. I think with a Mastery in hand, it's just whether we want to get, you know, the advantage of going for a second Mastery there is it plays around Thoughtseize. But, you know, even if they take the Mizzix's Mastery of the Thoughtseize, we can still just hardcast the Opus anyway, so I think this is better. Plus, if they don't have Thoughtseize, we can just pitch the Opus for a treasure and just overload the Mastery. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So that was pretty sick, you know. If we can ever overload a Mizzix's Mastery against mid-range decks, we're almost always going to win. Bristle Blast is important here as an answer to Shieldred. Now, we do have Divide by 0 once it's resolved, and we have Supreme Will to stop it on the stack, but Shieldred can be an issue considering a lot of our game plan revolves around drawing cards. And then Fiery Impulse, you know, it does have a reasonable number of targets, but the earliest they're going to play a creature is turn 2 for a Blood Tithe Harvester, so yeah, I think I'm just going to trim a Fiery Impulse because they don't have too many creatures that, you know, that we would kill with an Impulse that Bristle Blast or Molten Impact wouldn't be able to kill, if that makes sense. And in general, I think this matchup, you know, it's tough. I feel like this matchup is better with this build than it is with regular control because you generally have better top decks. You have, you know, as you saw last game, Magma Opus into Mizzix Mastery commits to the board so fast, which is really strong in this sort of matchup. But it is still tough. You know, Thoughtseize is a big problem. Discard spells in general are a problem because you're playing a control deck. But from my small sample size of matches in this matchup, it has felt slightly better than blue-white control, but not by much, I'd say. Okay, so Thoughtseize, interesting choices the opponent has here. I mean, Apparatus is the main card in our deck, so I wouldn't fault them for taking that. There is an argument to taking the Droid Disruption to, you know, stop us being able to stop their turn 3 plays and potentially denying us a land, but we are running a 28 land deck now, so I still feel pretty confident in chances of drawing another land. But again, I think the main reason they would want to take that is because it just stops us being able to counter their 3-drop, which is typically their most impactful card. You know, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Seasoned Pyromancer, they could be playing Jarsil as well as Crucius here. Okay, so they Croxer. I think I'm just going to discard it. Either an Impulse or an Impact here. Probably an Impact because there's nothing they play that has 4 toughness where the extra... I mean, maybe Tarmogoyf, but pitching Impact into the graveyard makes Fiery Impulse live. And I think Impulse now being able to kill Crucius at instant speed is very relevant. Or a lot more relevant than Impact anyway. Okay, they do play Crucius, so I'm very glad I kept hold of the Fiery Impulse here. Get to kill it before they get the trigger, which is nice. And now I don't feel in a bad spot. I mean, obviously not having the 4th land is an issue here. Maybe them taking the Droid Disruption is going to pay off because of that. But if we can hit our 4th land and go Apparatus on curve here, that's going to be really huge. We can go Divide by 0 to try and find, or to get the Environmental Sciences. Okay, I mean, we're definitely going to do something about this. I think I'm going to use Divide by 0 now. I'd rather save Supreme Will for something like a Shieldred, and I think rather than getting an Environmental Sciences, I prefer pitching one of the Apparatuses to try and find a land if I can. Because, you know, we've got Supreme Will in hand, so getting Environmental Sciences for 2 mana is awkward, because then it stops us holding open mana for Supreme Will, if that makes sense. Okay, Liliana, that is... we've got to counter that. And again, it's kind of unfortunate, because we would really like to get Apparatus in play as soon as possible, but I'm glad I bounced the Seasoned Pyromancer and countered the Liliana, because it's much more of an issue for our deck. Okay, Mastery is interesting. I don't think we were... Like, the awkward thing about Mastery in this deck is if you don't have Opus, it's not that great to just cast it normally. But we're pretty good at getting to 8 mana or, 6 mana or whatever if we have the Apparatus. But this does leave us kind of vulnerable to Croxer, which is a bit of an issue. One card I've been tempted to add to the sideboard is Unlicensed Hearse. Now, it is a bit annoying not running all spells because of the Apparatus, but I have struggled against specifically Croxer and sometimes Arclight Phoenix as well, so... okay. Opponent uses Thoughtseize. I'm going to flash in the Apparatus now because I feel like Mizzix Mastery isn't doing that much as things stand, but Apparatus means that we have a lot of good top decks. Oh, wow. Okay, that's kind of rough. So big score doesn't work unless there's another card in your hand, and the opponent is probably going to escape Croxer here to get rid of it, so... The big score's normally a great top deck as well, but against Rakdos, where they're very good at emptying your hand, it can leave you in awkward spots like this. So yeah, I assume they escaped the Croxer here. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. And then, yeah, we're just relying on the top of our deck after that. But again, Apparatus in play as it ticks up can lead to some very, very explosive turns, particularly if we draw, if we draw Mizzix's Mastery off the top and we can overload it straight away, that often just immediately wins you the game. Now, the slightly annoying thing about big score is even when you're casting it from the graveyard with the overloaded Mastery, you do have to have cards in your hand to discard to it still, but... Yeah, okay, so they do escape Croxer, and now we're on a pretty fast clock, right? So we go down to 18, but we're basically dead in 2 turns. Yeah, we drew a land, so... I mean, if we draw Mizzix's Mastery, we can still overload it next turn, so we've still got one more draw step that we could realistically use to get back into the game. I think an overloaded Mastery would get us back into this, because we can, we can kill the Croxer, we can divide by 0 the Croxer, and then just, get a bunch of value off other stuff. Oh, okay. So now Go Blank shuts off Mizzix's Mastery isn't out, which is a bit annoying. So now I don't even know what we could draw here. Well, I mean, I'll see what I draw, but I don't think there's anything we could draw that I can think of that would win us the game or get us back into the game now. Yeah, okay, that's not going to do it. So that was a bit unfortunate. I mean, I think that Thoughtseize taking the Mastery was obviously the key point in this game, and that just shows how... discard spells can be really brutal against this particular strategy. But again, on the flip side, if we'd drawn slightly better, there are a lot of good top decks once we have the Apparatus online as well. So oftentimes this matchup comes down to how many discard spells the opponent draws versus how well you top deck, if that makes sense. So this hand isn't amazing, but against Rakdos, or against discard spell decks in general, you want to mulligan as little as possible, because this matchup is all about going 1 for 1. And so if you start with fewer resources, it just makes the opponent's game plan a lot more simpler. Well, it's a lot easier for them to execute their game plan. Okay, Soulguide Lantern. So that shuts off Mizzix's Mastery, but that's not really a concern right now. There is the Magma Opus, which isn't really that useful in the early game, so I might end up having to just discard this for a treasure, even though the opponent has Graveyard Hate in play. But that's alright, accelerating on mana is pretty reasonable, especially if we draw like a big score or an Apparatus. Wow, they just cashed in the Lantern. Maybe they're missing land drops or something? I mean, I'm very happy to see that, because now we have the Opus in the graveyard. Okay, Mountain Pass, interesting. So we're definitely going to discard the Opus. And if we draw a Mastery or an Apparatus here, that would be insane. Okay, we don't, unfortunately. Still going to play an untapped land here because we want to be able to hold up Divide by 0 going into their turn 3. That's very important. Crucius, Jarsil, Liliana, Fable, all very important plays to stop. Now, it's interesting to see what threats they're running, because we haven't seen Jarsil yet. We have seen Liliana, we have seen Seasoned Pyromancer, we have seen Crucius, so there's a chance they're not running Fable, which would be interesting. Okay, there's Crucius. Definitely going to divide by 0 that. If we had an active Fiery Impulse, then I could see an argument for going for that instead. Going to go for Teachings of the Archaic here, and then... I don't think it's worth going for Teachings here, because I want to hold up Divide by 0 again. So I think we're going to have to wait until next turn for Teachings. But if we divide by 0 whatever they play, Teachings is going to guarantee us to draw 2 at the very least, which is nice. Unless they just completely empty their hands somehow. Okay, so again, Going to go for a tempo play here, just going to go for Divide by Zero, and I think I'm just going to get Mascot Exhibition here, because we're getting close to being able to cast it, and that is going to be difficult. You know, sideboarding against our deck is going to be quite annoying, because they kind of want to cut their creature removal, but they also, you know, could be in trouble if they completely cut it, because if we resolve tokens from Mascot Exhibition or Magma Opus, they're in trouble. Okay, Fiery Impulse is a great draw here, because if they go for Crucius again, we can just kill it before it triggers. So, see what the opponent does here. Hopefully they do play the Crucius. Okay, they are playing Jarsoul. And they can get back the Soul Guide Lantern, so we definitely want to kill that before it triggers. I mean, they could still play a land, I think, and play Crucius, which would give them a trigger, but we do have the Molten Impact to kill that, thankfully. Tarmogoyf, okay. I mean, I think I'm just going to play the Mascot Exhibition here. Be interesting to see how much creature removal they left in this matchup. Yeah, Tarmogoyf is a bit of an issue as things stand. You know, it's out of range of Molten Impact. The only way we have of dealing with it cleanly is another Divide by Zero. But I mean, again, if we can get an overloaded Mizzix's Mastery, with what we've got in our graveyard, like, I don't think any of their threats will be able to overcome that, unless they get a Shieldred in play. In which case we are in trouble, because so many of our spells revolve around drawing. So Shieldred could just like one-shot you if you... Well, not one-shot, but it'll do you a lot of damage if you're drawing off Magma Opuses and big scores and stuff. That's the main reason I brought in the Brittle Blast, just as a way to kill Shieldred. I mean, again, you can counter it, you can bounce it with Divide by Zero, but... And you need to make sure you're stacking your triggers correctly as well. So we're definitely going to Molten Impact the Crucius here. And then... I don't mind bouncing the Tarmogoyf with Otawara here. Start getting aggressive slightly. You know, leveraging the tempo that we bought in the early game off the Divide by Zeros. So it looks like opponent's thinking about something here. Okay, they got Spikefield Hazard. They take out one of our tokens. Then I think we'll just play a tap land here. And we'll start attacking. Having Hall of Storm Giants here is really important, because, you know, if they do just play Tarmogoyf, I mean, again, they could have kept in Fatal Push against us, so they could kill the Hall of Storm Giants with Fatal Push, but if they do just play Tarmogoyf as their only threat, we can fire up the Hall and potentially put them on a 2-turn clock. Okay, there's Croxer. So if they escape Croxer, they can make us discard the last card as well. See what they do. Okay, looks like they're going through the graveyard. So yeah, I imagine they do escape the Croxer here. So again, you know, this is another spot where it's kind of awkward. You know, Divide by Zero is like a good out to it, but we need to draw it off the top. We don't have quite enough mana to overload the Mizzix Mastery yet either, so... Which, you know, that would kind of suck if we drew... I guess if we drew Mastery off the top, we could just pick the best spell in our graveyard, right? I mean, either way, definitely going to fire up the Hall of Storm Giants here. And I think I'm going to attack with everything. We don't have to worry about Fatal Push on the Hall here. They could block the 4/4, but this puts them down to 3. And then... You know, they need a pretty good turn next turn to not be dead. And, you know, we have a lot of good potential top decks. Oh, no. Oh, that was a bad mistake. I should have played the land there. Okay, so that's really bad, because 2 outs we have in this spot are Magma Opus and overloading Mizzix's Mastery. And because Spybluff Canal is a tap land, if we draw either of those, we no longer win. So I might have just completely punted this game. No, that's so frustrating. Because, yeah, if we draw Magma Opus or Mizzix Mastery, if we'd played the Spybluff Canal last turn, we just win on the spot. Whereas now, I mean, we have to be careful to order our triggers so that we bounce the Shieldred before we draw a bunch of cards, but... Oh, that's so frustrating. In a way, I'm kind of hoping that I don't draw one of those 2 cards now, because I think we're going to struggle to win now they've got Shieldred as well. Oh, there... Yeah, okay, so... We should have won this if I played the Spybluff Canal last turn. Because I just Magma Opus them directly and win 4 damage directly. So yeah, that wasn't the deck's fault, that was me. Although, to be honest, you know, even if I play the land, we're not guaranteed to draw the Opus there, but I didn't play to my outs. I meant to play the land, so yeah, that was my bad. We should have won this had I played the land. But again, I got kind of lucky to draw the Magma Opus in the first place anyway, so I'm not sure how indicative that is of this spot. But yeah, that's frustrating. But yeah, that highlights why it's very important to think about your potential outs. Slaughter games, so I imagine they name Mizzix Mastery here. But yeah, if it's very easy to think like, you know, for example, maybe I should hold this Spy Bluff Canal to pitch to big score or something. But then you're not thinking that Magma Opus is lethal or overloading Mizzix Mastery is lethal. So yeah, always think about your outs. Always think about how much mana you need for them. Don't do what I did. I mean, to be honest, I was planning to play that land anyway. I just absent-mindedly ended the turn. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the times I do like holding onto lands with this deck to be able to pitch the big score, but yeah, definitely should have played that land there. So yeah, I mean, I assume they just exile Mizzix Mastery, and you know, we're going to discard the Magma Opus to the Croc, so they're already at 5 life now anyway, so even if we draw another Magma Opus off the top, that doesn't kill them anyway, so yeah. I basically punted this one, but again, I wasn't guaranteed to draw the Opus. We would have had to get quite lucky to draw that or Mastery anyway, so. Well, having said that, you know, I think if we'd drawn a Divide by Zero, it's kind of interesting there. You know, you've got potential outs. Well, having said that, we've already got the Mascot Exhibition, so. So here, I don't think we really get any value off the treasure. So we lose the Opus. And I think we just let it through. See what we draw. I mean, I think Mizzix Mastery... Oh, no, they've taken Mizzix Mastery out the deck. I was going to say I think Mizzix Mastery could still win us it, but they've just used Slaughter Games. And to be honest, you know, Magma Opus off the top would kill us now anyway, because we take 2 off the shielded for the draw. Yeah, okay. So we ended up losing this, but I basically punted by not playing that land. Okay, so what do we think of the deck overall then? I mean, I've played quite a lot with this deck, and I definitely think it has a lot of potential, you know. Like I said earlier, it does kind of occupy the same spot in the metagame that Blue-White Control does, but it definitely has, you know, strengths and weaknesses. This kind of feels a lot more like a combo deck once it does go off. You do have access to a lot more burst in the early game because of Opus Mastery, so even though it does occupy a similar spot to Control in the metagame, I think it does have its own strengths that make it better in certain, you know, metagame situations. In terms of changes going forward, I think I'm pretty happy with the main deck as it is, honestly. You know, having to run cards like Divide by Zero or Supreme Will that are slightly below par for Historic, I think it is worth it because they become significantly better with Mindsplice Apparatus. One immediate change that I'm tempted to make is try and find room in the sideboard for a couple of unlicensed hearse, because I have struggled against specifically Croxer and Arclight Phoenix. I'm not 100% sure what the right cut is. You know, maybe you could trim, you know, commence the end game. Maybe you could trim one of the Brotherhood's end. I'm not really sure. I feel like you do want Environmental Sciences, Teaching, Start from Scratch, and Mascot Exhibition, which does take up a number of slots in the sideboard. Maybe you could cut a Brittle Blast and a Commence the End Game, for example. That seems like it could work. And I do feel like even though you do want a lot of instants and sorceries, Unlicensed Hearse does feel quite important, specifically to deal with stuff like Croxer and Arclight Phoenix, but outside of that, I felt like the deck is definitely got a lot of potential, and I'm definitely going to be experimenting with it more as it goes forward. So anyway, if you've got any more suggestions about how to improve the deck, definitely let me in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video. Big up!